The primary purpose of Innovative AAC Solutions, the podcast, is to educate and inform. The views expressed during all episodes are solely those of the individuals involved and do not constitute educational or medical advice. They are not necessarily the views of Special School District of St. Louis County. Hey Cheryl, we are back
Hey, Laura.
for another week
Yay!
before spring break. Are you ready?
Yeah. Yes. Definitely. Always.
You got big plans?
No.
No, me neither this time. I usually travel, but I am staying put and
That's right.
organizing and just,
Okay.
I'm going to get my life together, I think.
Oh, okay.
5 days.
You got a week. Good. Yeah.
In 5 days.
And while you're organizing, I'm going to be sleeping. So we're good. Okay. We're fine.
But it'll be a nice, relaxing break. We hope all of your guys' breaks are going to be wonderful as well. But what do we have this week for Innovative AAC Solutions? What do we got? What do you got for me?
Well, first of all, can I ask you where you are? I don't recognize you being in that room when I left to come do this recording. Where did you go, Laura?
Well, Cheryl, great question. I am somewhere new this week, and if you've been following along this season, we are doing a fun game where if you tell Cheryl or I where I am located at, then we will send you some AAC swag. And so I feel like this is a pretty easy one to get. It's pretty intuitive, but just be the first one to email Cheryl or I. Cheryl, do you know?
Okay. Yeah. I figured it out.
Yeah.
So let's say it's a classic.
Yeah, it's a classic. And we'll just say there's many movies. Like there's a whole series on this that, we can go back to. I won't give any more clues because I feel like it's already pretty easy.
I was going to say, as far as one of those things where, you've got more shots, your odds are better because of the fact that they used that background.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Laura, we have all kinds of cool things going on here that we want to share with everybody. Do you remember years ago, my fun find today is an update on the prompting hierarchy that we've shared over the years. And that's what exactly when you said, I'm like, oh, I'm ready for the new one, but I didn't pull up the old one. The one that we talk about, you start with just, giving that expectant look and encouraging our kids to just, join in. But then as we kind of work our way through, we were working down more towards maybe giving them a little more physical help.
Mm.
And, over the years, all of us are learning and we're growing and thinking about how we are interacting with not only each other, but with our kids. And Rachel Langley has said, maybe we better step back a little bit and think about how we're doing this. So let me share what she just recently has shared with us on Facebook and Instagram and, all the different ones. So she titled this Revisiting the AAC Prompt Hierarchy. And I thought this was a nice way for us to just remind everyone that we still want you to do the thoughtful pauses. We want you to, lean in, give them that, show them you're interested with your body language, observe and comment, model just for the sake of modeling, just because you're talking with systems and you're using multimodal communication. But then what she's asking us to be aware of is sometimes we've been doing things that could be construed as harmful in the fact that we're doing a lot of demanding. We're asking for compliance in the fact that she's, says here, model so they can copy you. Well, that's, and I have to admit, I've done all these things where it's like, okay, now you do it. It's like, well, that's me telling them, forcing them, being kind of rigid about the fact that they could only do what I told them to do. And then maybe asking them to repeat it, say it type of thing. So she's pulling out on paper so you can share these with your teams that, we want to just kind of be careful about doing those. And then we also want to be very careful about making sure we're not doing hand over hand and invading our students' autonomy. We're not forcing ourselves on them as far as making sure that they do it the way we want them to do it. And she gives a whole sheet here of resources that you can click on the QR codes and get more information about why we need to be aware of this, and how that research is showing that kids actually did better with passive modeling rather than hand over hand modeling. And I've always said that when you go and grab a kid's hand, they become a marionette. They're just letting you, do what you want to do anyway. But then also I am trying to be more aware of the fact that I've just invaded their space. And I don't like it when somebody comes up and tries to make me do something, even if they don't touch me and just they try to make me do something. I'm not crazy about that. But here we've been doing this physical overpowering of them that it's harmful. It's causing them to be anxious and distressed when we didn't need to do that. That wasn't something that was purposeful on our part.
Well, and I think it brings us back to it becomes difficult to discern with someone who is non-speaking or minimally speaking or someone with complex communication needs because we don't truly know what they want to say. And when our goal is for them to say what they want to say when they want to say it to anyone and not say what they don't want to say when they don't want to say it. When we use hand over hand prompting and we would use maximum prompting, our actions are counterintuitive of what we actually want. So if we want the student to say something when they want something or when they want to tell us something and not say something when they don't, then our level of prompting needs to support that. And if we're forcing
Right.
them to say things because we think it's the target, how do we really know if that's what they wanted to say? And we don't. And so that's why I love this revisit to how we can support them, still using thoughtful, constructive, planned intervention, but rethinking the way that that looks for them and still supporting them because we know they're at risk for physical and emotional abuse compared to other individuals. When you have a disability, that percentage goes up. And so we want to be instilling autonomy and we want to be instilling body awareness and not having people put their hands on them. And so I just kind of love this for all those reasons and thinking about how we can support them in other ways. I think it's so important.
And the idea that when we in the past have made it more of a demand, or you have to say this, you have to point to this, and here, let me show you where it's at. We've made the AAC system, is what you and I are kind of focusing on right now, a work, kind of a drudgery. So like you were saying, we want them to use it because they've got stuff to share, not because we tell them what to say. But I think we in the past have presented our systems that way. We've presented them as work. And that's the reason we've got a lot of pushback from our kids and abandonment of the systems, because they didn't want to do that. That wasn't something they felt was worth their time. And yet we took that as being kind of a, well, then, I'll show you, I'll make you, and stuff. So much of what we've done in the past is time for changes and revisions and revisiting. So I thought this was a nice way to just, remind everybody to think of it different.
One other thought too, Cheryl, is just this idea that I know it's a fancy word, but I really try to use aided language input whenever I can instead of the word modeling, because at its foundational level, modeling does in like
I do, you
provide
do.
this. Yes, it does. It's used in that context of
Yeah.
like I do something, then you do something. And when we use the term aided language input, it's just freely given, right? And how do kids acquire language? It's freely given and they absorb it in their own time and space and they use it correctly, but they also make mistakes, and that is as to be expected. And so when we use this word modeling and when we have this anticipative like model, you'll model on the device. Well, then yeah, like I'll give you a model, but you have to give me something back. And again, we should be giving that input at 6-1 so that like we're touching it way more than them. And the hope is that they come back and they touch it, on their own. Way more
Yeah.
powerful using some of these
Yeah.
strategies. So I love it. I think it's great. I think it's easily printable. I love that you shared it. We'll put it in the notes so that anybody
Yep.
that wants more can go to these other, we've got QR codes for Jane Farrell and Kate Ayrn, all the great people that you guys can dive in if you want more info. My fun find, it's not as timely as it would have been before our last episode because it's related to phonics and literacy, but I had to share it, Cheryl, because I just think it's a really great resource that some of our audience might want to dive into that got into our last episode about literacy. And that's this new book that has just come out called Access to Phonics. Practical Access Strategies to Teach Children with Complex Needs of All Ages. And it just was released on February 20th, 2023 from Anne Sullivan. And
That's hot off the press. Wow.
super hot, super fresh. Everyone seems to be very excited about it. I have not had a chance to sit down and read it yet. I've been chasing children around my house.
Yeah.
But we know
You
it's
can
the
do that on
found.
spring break. Oh.
There we go. This is my reading material. So we know phonics is the foundation of reading and spelling, and it's a crucial part of reading instruction that does not occur without direct facilitation and support. So how do we continue to support our learners or emergent literacy learners or our students with complex communication needs? This is got some really great starting points, and people are pretty excited. So definitely check this one out. I think it's so new. I don't even know if we have it in the IRC yet, but kind of keep your eyes peeled because it may be coming.
I'd say that is definitely something that we, like I said, if we've talked about it, it's probably not shipped yet. So yes, I would keep a lookout for that.
And so this book is about students of all ages or children of all ages and would be a great resource. I thought it was time to kind of come back to the basics, Cheryl, and sit down with an SLP who really knows her stuff and knows learners of all different types and supports learners of all ages. So I got to sit down with Katelyn Kelps, SLP for over 8 years in a school district and supports all different kinds of learners. I love what she has to say. She does share on social media, but I love what she has to say about Gestalt language learning for older students. And she talks all about groups and how she embeds things in groups. And just we got to sit down and have a little chat. So I thought maybe we could dive into her interview today. What do you think?
Sounds good. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Great. So I won't make you wait any longer. Let's dive into my interview. Hey guys, welcome back to Innovative AAC Solutions, the podcast. And today I am so excited to welcome Katelyn Kelps onto the show. Hi, Katelyn.
Hi.
So, whenever I have someone on, I tell people, I'm like, why don't you just introduce yourself? So for our listeners who perhaps don't know you, give us your background and kind of how you dove into the world of AAC.
Awesome. I am a school-based speech language pathologist. I work mostly at the high school, but also with kindergarten, first grade, in rooms that mostly use AAC or multimodal communication. My dive into AAC is an interesting one. I actually hated it in grad school and said, never doing this in my life. I don't care. And then they gave me an adult AAC user as my first client in the clinic, and I fell in love. I didn't even take a medical placement. They put me at a school with all AAC users as my medical placement, and it was just love from there.
So funny. You're not alone. I know so many people where it's like, I'm never going to do this. I said I was never going to work at a school, and here I am.
Yep.
What was the system that your client had?
It was like a Dynavox Maestro. It was an old school. She had it forever, and they had tried new things, and she just wasn't into trying something new. So we had a pod, we had the Maestro, and we just it was switch scanning.
Okay.
So they really threw me in hard.
Yeah, they did. You were learning about all the things, access and language at the same time. So, okay. So then you went to your placement, which was with adults?
Kids.
Oh, that was with kids. Okay.
Yes, it was a therapeutic day school.
Okay.
Was my first placement, and then my second was public school.
Okay.
Middle school.
Okay. And one thing that you said that I think is kind of interesting that I would love more info on is that you said you work with high school and then you work with the itty bitties.
I do.
So you're missing the middle?
Yes, I am like 3.5 days at the high school. And so I do more than just AAC at the high school. I see our language-based resource students as well. But then the elementary school, I just support one classroom for a day and a half a week.
Okay. Do you find that you're using a lot of the same materials, or are there differences between the two populations?
I definitely use different materials. A lot of my high schoolers throughout the day, they're kind of using their own interests and things like that. So I do like to try to give them a little bit more exposure to things that their peers. So we do a lot of like pop music and things like that to kind of entice kind of those high school interests that maybe they don't get a ton of exposure to because they can't access them. So
Absolutely. So if you're thinking about, and you can highlight differences or similarities, but if you're thinking about considerations with AAC in the classroom, let's just start with the high school students. What considerations do you think are really important there?
this is going to sound so weird, but with my AAC students, for both, but especially the high school, I actually focus first on a rapport with the teacher, then rapport with the students, which sounds backwards, but if I can get teachers to trust me and realize I'm there to help and not just boss them around, that makes a huge difference for buy-in. So usually the first couple of weeks of school, I'm sitting in the classroom helping where I can help. I've been trained for changings and feedings, just so that way if they're down staff, they call me and they know that I'm a part of the team and not just someone that comes in for 30 minutes a week and says you're doing this all wrong. So I think that rapport piece, staff wise, makes a huge difference.
Well, and we know that from for coaching models too, right?
Mm-hmm.
And how people are going to be receptive from an adult learning model,
Yes.
and that rapport building is equally, if not as more important to
Mm-hmm.
establish with your
Right. It's
team. And
almost it's easy to build a rapport with the kids. It's
right,
harder to build one with the adults, and not in a bad way. It just takes a little bit more effort.
right, right, because we have a lot more on our plate, if you will, to try
Mm-hmm.
to juggle, and so it can be cumbersome with the AAC to
Yes.
add as one more thing.
Because I think exactly. A lot of times we come in and they're like, "You want me to do what all day? I don't. I'm doing this, this, and this. When do I have the time for that?" So sometimes
Right.
coming in and showing them this is how I would do it, or this is a simpler way to do what I do, or and that coaching piece is huge.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's give the listeners an example. What might that look like for a student, or just think back on an example, whether it be high school or maybe both. What does that look like? Giving them an example of push-in.
So sometimes, so at the elementary, I do a lot of literacy push-ins. So when they're doing their reading centers or whatever, I'll take a center and I either sit with the teacher or with paraprofessionals and kind of show them this is how we can model in the book. I show them things like going through a book really fast and kind of picking out repetitive words that we can model and reminding them like you don't have to model everything. That's too much. I get that. So that understanding piece as well. At the high school, it's more of those functional living skills. So going on community and showing them how to request help and things like that. Laundry, and sometimes it's even showing them like maybe we don't bring the device right by the filled washing machine or sink, and we use a backup instead. But pushing into those things that happen every single day that aren't necessarily a structured language task. They're great. If I write, if we write a teacher, this is what you're going to do every single time they turn on the computer, they can handle that. It's really incorporating it into those natural opportunities that I think it's hard to juggle because you're juggling teaching the task, teaching the language. So if you can push in and show them and model, makes a huge difference.
And you do a really nice job of creating resources that kind of go along with practicing what you preach. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So something that I always try with like my resources on Teachers Pay Teachers is also like navigation pathways or like simple modeling for tasks. Because again, I think if we can provide that to teachers, so I know like a lot of times like on our table, like our centers tables at the elementary school, I have lists of you can model, let's play, I need help, I want more, and things like that. I put the symbols by them. So a lot of my resources have all of that built in, or even core boards for specific tasks with that fringe vocabulary. So that way it's all in one place and gives them ideas of things to model and things to teach.
And something, and there's not necessarily a clear answer for this, but something that a lot of our SLPs struggle with, and teachers too, and even pairs, everybody is the group aspect of if you have users on different systems and different supports. So how do you navigate that challenge in the classroom?
It can be tricky, especially because at the high school, we're doing mostly groups. Like I'm pushing into normal everyday tasks, but then I'm leading a group, and that can be so hard. I typically save, like and laminate a ring of commonly used phrases and things of their navigation pathways that I just kind of bring in. If that kid's using LAMP, I throw the LAMP one to the aide that's sitting with them. I throw the touch chat one to a different person. Lesson wise, sometimes I use just Boardmaker, and then we kind of, sometimes I'll give like a prompt, like that's under actions in there, but it's on the main page there. So kind of familiarizing myself really well before I go in to know where those targeted words are. So that way I can prompt the staff to help me model all at once, or we'll kind of do like a wait time, and I'll go around and model once and then have the staff model and then kind of help with even like the prompting from there. So there's a lot more wait time and silence, I think, in those groups, and that's okay. Sometimes then you get way more spontaneous language. So
I love that. And you kind of glossed over that strategy. I just want to reemphasize it because I think it's such an important one to note is the fact that it's okay to first go slow and give that model. I think we can sometimes jump in to our lesson and all the materials and things that go along with it, whether it be books or manipulatives and things. And knowing for both the paras and the students, going around one time and modeling the target word so everybody has a clear expectation of like, this is what we're really practicing and giving that input first. There's so many benefits to that.
Yes. And I've even done it where we do the same lesson all month, and who's teaching it changes. So the first 2 times I'll teach it, and it might be we're doing shared reading. And so maybe we're doing different books, but that's the lesson. So I'll do it, and then they'll do small groups, then one-on-one. Then sometimes if kids really get it and have the language, they're leading the group too by the end. So that way everyone kind of gets a chance to kind of watch me then practice. So it's a mix of, which if you can fit this in, this is, I think, the best way to do it with a busy school schedule. I mix in that coaching with the language opportunities. So then small groups work great. And I just kind of walk around and facilitate.
Oh, I love that. So many things to unpack there. Are you using any supports when you're coaching, or are you just kind of doing it on the fly with verbals and modeling yourself?
I've done kind of both ways. I do have resources for coaching, kind of our prompting hierarchy, and then our communicative functions. And so then this is hard, and I know it's hard. I had the other year like a really unique schedule where I had time to sit down with every single paraprofessional in my AAC classrooms for 15 minutes a week, one-on-one, and go through a mini lesson. And then they had homework throughout the week. And when we would go like check back in the next week, I check in on that and then kind of move forward. So then in group, they knew exactly what I was looking for, and I was able to give feedback on the lesson we just did, but that's not always realistic. So sometimes I'll even just bring in a work, like a note sheet of this is what we're doing, this is the order you should do it, and they kind of, I print one for each staff member, hand it to them, and then we just kind of fly from there. And it's sometimes it's structured, sometimes it's not.
Right.
That's real life.
Right. The best laid plans, right? Like, yeah. And that's okay. And that's okay. Cause like you mentioned, sometimes even going off the script and just allowing a lot of wait time builds in this beautiful spontaneity that you can build off of.
Because and I think that's huge for buy-in too, because staff, well-meaning, want to fill in those gaps and provide the language. And then when they get to see it with you of like how a strategy works or an activity works or things like that, and they see like, that's not what I thought they were going to say. Or I think that's kind of when the magic happens.
Right. Right. And that's what I always tell people too, that's what we would expect to happen. You know, that magic, it's not, if we have 5 words, they're going to say all 5 words. I always think about my kids, and just the other day, it's like the squirrel moment, right? Like you're like, okay, I think we're talking about this book. And then they notice something on the wall and they comment about that. And I'm like, where did that come from? But we honor that. And that's how language builds, because we're just commenting on what they notice and we're following their lead. And so we should be offering that same thing in the classroom.
And that helps so much with even like self-advocacy and like taking ownership of their device. I had a student one time who would appearingly be off topic, And then one day I was like, do you want that in your device? They nodded and showed me exactly where they wanted it in their device. And so from then on, we'd take like the last 5 minutes of every group and everyone, like, what do you need in your device? And we kind of taught how to do that. And I wouldn't have done that if it were not for honoring that student's communication.
Yeah.
So it was good to teach all of those kids that skill of how to advocate for what you need.
So many wonderful things. It sounds like you guys have kind of just a pattern that you're kind of rolling into and you're gelling. Anything else that you feel like is really working for you guys as far as implementation and strategies or resources that you really enjoy that you feel like are beneficial?
Resources wise, I love the AAC implementation toolkit from Speechy Musings. I think that the work, like the handouts and things, are so easy to hand off. It's easy to like break it into chunks. Something that helps me teacher wise, not as much with paraprofessionals, but if we can set aside 15 or 20 minutes a week to sit down and say, this is the plan. And sometimes it's just them telling me the plan, but then I know how to support them, or I can say, what visuals do you need? What language models do you need? And I can send them an email with ways to incorporate what kids are working on with me into those lessons. Because again, that buy-in, I'm making it easier for them. They don't have to brainstorm those things then. It's all right there.
Yes. Love it. So practical. What about any challenges that you're seeing at either level as far as things that are just kind of getting sticky or in the way?
I think the timing is always a huge issue for schools. Like it sounds like nothing to find 15 minutes, but then when you add in IEP meetings and different team schedules and things like that, all of a sudden your 15 minutes is gone. So that, and even sometimes I know that like I'm like, that went great. And then I leave and I'm like, but are they doing it? So kind of like, sometimes it can be hard to teach ways for staff to carry over what we just worked on. Because with you, they're confident, you're their visual. When we think about like that executive functioning, you're their natural visual of, I should be doing that. And then you leave, and then all of those other tasks come in. And yeah, the feeding, changing takes priority. And then it just kind of goes out the window sometimes.
It's like, how do we build a prompt hierarchy and for the adults?
Yes.
Yeah.
Sometimes I add like a nice visual on the door or something. I have one teacher that gives me a whole bulletin board. So I'll put like a strategy of the month up. But I'm not always that lucky in classrooms. So
that's great though. What a great model that you have for in report. Sounds like you have with that teacher specifically. Okay. What do you think would be some opportunities for collaboration growth and making it more continuous in the classroom across environments? Or I would love, well, let me ask that one first.
I think, again, the more that we can insert ourselves into the day from the get-go, right? So the beginning of the year, sometimes I don't have a schedule yet. And I'm just saying, I'm going to come to recess with everybody on Tuesday. Then I'm going to push into reading on Wednesday. And I'm kind of seeing where the needs are. And then I build my schedule around that. And that seems to help. And I even look at like, wow, during lunch, it seems like there are a lot of behaviors and they could use an extra hand. So I'm going to make my push in time during lunch. And language can be worked on anytime. We know that. So if you can kind of do it so that way you're adding an extra hand and extra help during a particularly difficult time, I think makes it easier. Again, not always possible though.
Yeah.
I feel like for every like area of growth or thing that works, there's also the challenges that go along with that piece.
Right. That you're working through. And Katelyn keeps laughing because she has a co-interview today, folks. Do you want to introduce your co-interview?
This is my kid, Linda.
She's the sweetest.
She's been missing me, so she's making a little bit of an appearance, but that's okay.
That's okay, right? These are opportunities to talk about. So here's a big picture question that we talk about a lot with amongst ourselves and with some of our SLPs is the idea, you mentioned that you work with the itty bitties and then you also work with some of these young adults. And I'd be curious to know, as I'm sure our listeners would, what do you think are the opportunities for growth between the two? Or what do you think is missing, right? We want this continuous growth across the lifespan, and sometimes we feel like we're just missing it, or we're like, what happened? Like we missed our opportunity, and now they're a young adult and they're frustrated. So any insight there?
I think sometimes if like in the younger years, we're looking and we're saying like it's the access piece. People get intimidated if you can't use direct access. Then it's like, well, what do we do now? And then they get to high school. My first year with a student, they had absolutely nothing. They had like a choice board. And then I introduced like a one symbol per page pod and flew with it. Because nobody has thought about like partner assisted scanning and all of those alternative access. I think like making sure that everyone across the span has education in access and different ideas, and even like our backups, right? Like it's okay to teach more than one access method, because I might be tired one day and now I can't use direct access. I'm gonna need you to use partner assisted access or scanning. But if they were never taught that, then they can't use it. And so then they're just out of luck, which is not fair. So there's that. I also think sometimes we start to steer away from honoring communication for some reason. Once a kid gets pretty proficient, we focus so hard on like the language and sentence building and stop honoring single word, 2-word utterances. And then device abandonment happens by the time they get to high school. So I'll see a kid in elementary school and then see them again in high school. And I'm like, what happened? You loved your device. And now there's just nothing. You don't want it. You push it away. It becomes work. So the more we can continue to make language fun, I think that part goes away. Middle school and high school, it's about working and getting job ready rather than having fun and building connections.
Mm. Such good insight. I did want to clarify, we've done a lot of talking about pod and partner assisted scanning on this podcast, but if someone is new or listening to this episode out of sync with other episodes, pod stands for Pragmatic Organization Dynamic Display. It is a dynamic light tech resource that is also available on high-tech speech generating devices that is pragmatically organized. So the one that Katelyn's mentioning is a one-page one that you don't need. It's still robust in the sense that you auditorially scan through those pages as a communication partner, so that you give different pragmatic functions to the student that you're working with. So still very robust, and just a different access method, in that the student would auditory, or they would indicate yes through a body function when they hear the auditory choice presented to them. Hopefully I did you justice explaining
you
that.
You did it justice.
Perfect. So, I think going back though, in understanding that social connection piece that you mentioned, I think is so critical, because there is some level of, at times we see almost AAC trauma in the fact that like, I'm not using this anymore because we have stopped honoring their messages, and sometimes their message isn't our message. And
this is going to sound, but I feel like it's easy sometimes in the chaos of a day to ignore the AAC system, the voice coming out. Sometimes it's too quiet. Sometimes it's just chaotic in the room. It happens. And instead of, whereas a speaking student, we say, yeah, hang on, because it's like that automated synthetic foot. We just kind of walk away, which is frustrating. If no one's going to listen to you, why would you use it?
Yeah. And I think it takes, again, because we're so busy, I think it takes a lot of creativity, and that can take energy too. Creativity to incorporate something that might not be the curriculum as listed into the curriculum. So like I have a student who really did not want to use the system and used it for typing things that were scripted or way off topic for what the curriculum as listed was. But once we integrated, his favorite thing was SpongeBob. Once we integrated that back into his curriculum and had those targets just by introducing the character of SpongeBob into it, he was right back into the mix.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that too, like the fun piece, like we can still have it be child-led and incorporate special interests with it still serving a purpose, whether it's a vocational purpose or an academic purpose. It doesn't take away from that learning. Just to add in SpongeBob, it's the same thing. They're still learning it. um,
Exactly. And I sometimes, if they are off topic, or if they're seeming, like you mentioned your one student, like it sounds like they're way over here, but just by pulling them back in and redirecting them by honoring it,
mhm.
you're getting the buy-in, which is
Yes.
what we
And I
want.
think sometimes too, that honoring is important because we're validating a feeling. Maybe they're worried about that. So that's why they're stuck on it and off topic, not because they're bored. They can't focus on us until we all talk about that. Which again, then gives them the ownership and the buy-in and shows staff how to kind of redirect other than the like, it's not your turn to talk or that's off topic.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And we would want the same if we had something that we really wanted to say, or, we joke because my son loves corn dogs and you love corn dogs, but like
I do love corn dogs.
if you wanted to talk about corn dogs and Sonic, and I was like, Katelyn, this is a podcast. We're not talking about corn dogs and Sonic. Like how bummed would you be? You would just, the rest of your message would be like, lose value.
Yeah, it would hurt my feelings.
Yeah. Yeah. And the same goes for my son. Like we have to honor anyone's message and anyone's thoughts so that we can continue to keep them in a place of learning, in a place of social connection.
Yeah, we can't learn if we're sad
Right.
or frustrated.
Right.
Anybody.
Yeah. And then going back to that whole idea is how many of these older, young adults are at a place where their message hasn't been honored for a very long time. And so we've lost some of those opportunities, and we have to go back to the beginning, which is that rapport building.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or teachers, right? Like how many teachers have we lost because they just feel so inundated and we haven't honored, or parents, like anyone, right? We haven't honored the basic things that they're telling us and started there. So I think that message and the piece of collaboration across a classroom is so important.
Mm-hmm.
I love that that's your first message.
Yeah. And it doesn't even just go to teachers. Like I spend time building rapport with paraprofessionals, getting to know about their family, getting to know, coming in and saying, you look tired. Do you want me to step in for you for a second? Go take a walk and come back. And as soon as, again, it builds trust, because then you know how hard their job is. They have the hardest job.
And they know,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that makes a big difference. Because
Yeah.
I can't, before I started doing that, and I would just come in and be like, you should do that. I'd hear like, you're not here all day. You don't know how it works.
Yep.
So I decided to be there all day.
Yep.
Just at the beginning, but then, and now I see how it works. So
yeah, that perspective. I can't let you go without asking, we talked about speech musings and some of your favorite resources, but you create a lot of resources yourself. Can you share with our listeners just like your top 3 that you've created?
For my high schoolers, I would definitely say I have some core and fringe, more like life skills lessons. So things like community science and safety, and it has some problem solving in there. It has core. It's also great because I even still have some high schoolers who are Gestalt language processors using that delayed echolalia. And so it has nice kind of Gestalt model in there as well. For my younger friends, I absolutely love, and these 2 resources are like my favorite to create. I have communicative functions kind of units. So it's a month-long lesson that teaches different core words for that function and different ways to use it. So again, it also is a great way to collaborate then with staff because they're seeing it constantly, and it's a good coaching and training piece. And then I also have some early literacy books that focus on core, but again, that collaboration piece tie into literacy for teachers. So that's kind of when I collaborate with teachers during reading, we'll take out one of those books and then work on rhyming, print awareness, phonics, things like that.
Also good. If you guys are interested in more Gestalt language processing, we do have an episode with Alex Zakos that we can refer to in the show notes. And then as far as pragmatic functions, if you're not a speechy like we are, pragmatic functions just stands for different ways that we use language, right? So we can request, we can comment, we can protest, we can ask questions, all of those great things. So pulling in core vocabulary to all those different pragmatic functions and how we use language can be so, so, so powerful and helpful across different activities. So definitely we'll make sure to include a link to your resources so people can check those out. And then, okay, Caitlin, we're wrapping up, but everyone that comes on, we always ask, what is your favorite AAC moment to date? It could be one for yourself or something that you've had with a student.
This is kind of a general one. My absolute favorite is when you're teaching a kid to protest, and then that first spontaneous time that they tell you to go away, and everyone's like, oh, "That's so rude," and you're like, "No, this is great." And then even like the huge smile that happens when you walk away, really kind of is always my reminder of like why I love AAC. Um, there's just nothing like it. Today I had a kid, and I said, "It's your turn." Went in, all done. And I was like, okay, I love when kids get sassy. Um, then
Yes.
you get to see their personality coming out too, which you don't get to see if they don't have language.
Yes.
Um, so it's just extra special and fun.
Yeah. Oh, I love that so much.
I know.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it too. Like I always tell people, I'm like, you gotta have thick skin when you're working with the AC
Mhm.
users because they will tell you, like, I love it when they tell me that my outfit is on point. I just learned a new word for this, by the way. Chuggy. Have you heard of this with your young adults in high
Chugi?
school? Chuggy, yeah.
Oh yeah, Chugi's not a good one. You
No.
don't want to be called Chugi.
I was like, I guess we're gonna have to start adding that to some of our AAC devices
Mhm.
because
Oh yeah. I
yeah.
also had to add, I had a student come and ask me to add in the F word. He spelled it out for me because he got in a fight in the locker room and punched someone. And when I asked why, the answer was I didn't have a quick way to tell them to F off.
Mm,
So
yep,
we added it because that's age appropriate.
yep,
All the other kids are saying it. He hears it in the locker room. I did consult with mom first.
sure.
And mom said, yeah, go for it. We say it at home all the time.
Yeah. See?
But
All
those
about the environment.
Yes, and that was another cool like self-advocacy moment of like this is what I need to be a successful communicator.
Mm. Such a great example. I'm going to say thank you. Thank you, Caitlin, for so many just wonderful gems of insight. I know that there can be things that they can go to tomorrow, the resources, we'll put them in the show notes. Just been a great time. So thank you so much for coming on today.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
All right. So for Innovative AAC Solutions, I'm Lara Hayes. We'll catch you next time.
Hi guys, it's Cheryl. Wanted to take a second to go to Teachers by Teachers, which I know a lot of us are familiar with, but this is the communication classroom site that Katelyn has. So she referenced different things that she has on there, and just for the sake of being, you know, helpful, I'm trying just to look at the free stuff at the moment, but she has tons more. So go check it out. But just for our little exploring expedition here, I'm going to scroll down and look at some of the things that she offers. So, first of all, top of the list here is her AAC Flipbook for Gestalt Language Processing, and it is free. So, just to let you know, as far as we Gestalt language processing is something we're talking about throughout all of our districts these days because we're learning on a daily basis. So she has put together a little manual flip book that you could put together, download it, print it, and then looks like there's some thing, you cut out the different tabs that you're gonna show as you're flipping, but at least it's something there quick and easy. So it might be a nice way for you to explore with all of your kids just to see what their interest is and what new things might happen. So that's one that I would love for I'm going to download it, so I'll have more information about it, but I definitely want you to know that it's there. She's got some activities. I see a snowman, core vocabulary book, and so she's got some the pieces that you can be interactive and some writing. Uh, so it's a nice combination of things. And then there was a spring one. I saw that. Let me scoop down here. There's what does Wally want? But let me scroll around. Yeah, spring scavenger hunt. So she's got that in here too. Let's go back up for a second. She's got some data collection sheets. So let's look at that real quick. So again, something that you might find very helpful. And high school SLP Toolkit, because that was one of the great things about the interview that she did with Laura was she covers a lot of age range. So what's the difference between, working with what was it, kindergarten through second grade, and then she's also got the high school kids. So I think this one's cool in the fact that it's what we can tell from the first screen here is, about the student. What are their interests? What are their strengths? What are so if you can jot down things, and if you keep this as a running process, you'll learn new things about your student and you'll build on their interest. So that looks like more for, like I said, her keeping track of everybody. And then there's the diverse ability book list, which I thought was something that is nice. I appreciate her taking the time to put together. So she's evidently, what I'm looking at here is got all kinds of kids books that she has found, and then she has categorized them on whether the characters or the people in the book are using AAC, if they have a diagnosis of Down syndrome, if they have motor abilities, cerebral palsy, or autism. So she's got quite a few. So that would be fun to bring into both your therapy sessions, but also into the classrooms so that everybody's learning more about how people are different. So like I said, she's got all kinds of things. So when you get a minute, check it out.
Laura here, and today our innovative activity is probably one of everyone's favorites, but the little spin. So today our activity is Uno Attack. If you are not aware, Uno upped their ante, upped their game, and had a version of Uno Attack that came out a few years ago. It is essentially the same as Uno, but the person in charge of controlling the amount of cards you get is this machine Uno Attack. And so when you have to pick up cards, you have to push the button and it issues you cards. So sometimes you get one card and sometimes you get like 8 cards. So it tends to make the game a little more exciting, a little more fun, a little more unpredictable. And the one that we have here that's available for checkout in the IRC is special because this one is actually Switch accessible, so that when we activate it, if you have a student who is using any of our switches that with maybe a more complex body and needs something that's Switch accessible, they have this opportunity to really control the game and be the one in charge of issuing how many cards each player gets. So you don't have to have you don't have to have a Switch accessible one to work on language though, right? So for any of our students, we can work on directing actions. I go, you go, get more. If we want to work on questioning, we can also do that, right? Like, how many cards do you have? Whose turn is it? Where did that card go? Because it flew off the table, right? We can work on all of those things. We can work on commenting. This activity is so motivating for commenting, especially if you have some trash talkers in your group. They might want to say things like, oh, that stinks, bummer. Think of your game, sorry, but not sorry. Sorry, not sorry. That would be a really fun one to program into a communication device. I'm thinking of all of the students that I work with and just how much they would love sorry, not sorry. It's so motivating, right? And how many of our students say that, like I'm winning or no cheating. All of those things are great phrases to just target commenting and pull in some of that motivating language within this activity itself. And then of course you can terminate the activity and work on, we don't talk about that one a lot because it's pretty much universal, but for this activity specifically, like I'm finished playing cards or I want something different. All of those are options. Or just negative commenting, right? Like, this stinks. I don't like this. I don't like the fact that it issues 8 cards. I would definitely say that in this game. Those are all things that we need to work on with our students. So check out Uno Attack. This one, like I said, is super great because if you have someone that has a complex body, they are completely in charge of it. And so it's accessible. And yeah, it's available in the IRC. So come check it out.
Hey, Laura, that was really good.
Thanks.
Talk about somebody who can appreciate a lot of our days like I said, the teams that we support. I felt like she was stepping right off of our, one of our schools. So yeah, I was in the range of things that she does. It's like I'm impressed that she's covering both ends at that age range. But she's doing our daily day stuff. I loved it.
And she's just got such a flexible and creative personality. I think it just exudes from her in how she thinks about what her students
Yeah.
need and how she thinks about what her teams need. I think, and that's so important when we think about collaboration with other professionals, especially ones that maybe they have different viewpoints than we do, and how can we really integrate that for better outcomes for our students.
Yeah. No, she said she starts with the adults first. It's like,
Yeah.
and that's, I have to say, my first, I get laser focused on my kid, but it's like, oh, it's all these other people that are going to be with them, much more than I possibly could be. And she's made that her priority. So I appreciated that.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that's all we have for this week. I feel like let's wrap it and let's send everyone into
Mhm.
spring break. Let positive, good vibes for the weather.
Yeah, I was
And
going to say the weather can go either way. So we're going to hope for spring days, not winter days that some parts of the country are having, which is like, I'm so happy I live where I do right now.
right, right. Well, thanks for joining us again. We hope you have a great spring break. We will catch you on the other side of it as we finish out a few more episodes before the end of the year. And we have a few more tricks up our sleeve and
Yeah.
exciting moments to come. So for Innovative AAC Solutions, I'm Lara Hayes.
And I'm Cheryl Livingston.
See you next time.
Bye.